Oh, hi folks. Thought I'd have a change of scenery this evening since I'm doing some work anyway. Um, yeah, I'm. I was reviewing some of the information on the internet the other day, and I come across the old stories of this guy called Jimmy Savile. And anybody knows about Jimmy Savile to know that he was basically a devil incarnate. He was absolutely born evil, this guy. And he got away with literally murder. He was a paedophilic psychopath necrophile who was well known and accepted as part of the inner circle for the royals in the United Kingdom. That's why I despise them, because of their satanic side. And furthermore, they're German. They have no claim to the throne of England, do the Saxon Coburg-Gothas. But that's besides the point. But looking at the Jimmy Savile, who basically was one step away from being an amoeba, as far as I was concerned, I still wonder how the hell he managed to get away with what he got away with. And it's not without help from the establishment, leaving it at that. Now, I wanted to do more videos about self-improvement, but I thought I'd, on this occasion, make an exception, because what I'm telling you maybe help you to self-improve. I'm not going to help you be a mass murderer, that's for sure, or a paedophile, or a psycho-satanic ritualist. But I want to talk about certain aspects and just maybe how it is, shed some light on my take on how these people actually get away with it. Well, it's not without a great deal of help. Because, excuse me, I'll just make some adjustments because I'm getting a light reflection. Try that a little bit. There we are, how's that? I'm going to tell you a little story. There used to be, just to make an example, there used to be a fabulous TV series, perhaps some of you will know if you're in the UK, and it was called Tales of the Unexpected. And it was a series of short stories written by, I think it was a guy called Roald Dahl, strangely enough. And he was quite a prolific writer, was Roald Dahl, ex-Spitfire pilot, I might add. And he wrote also The Big Friendly Giant and other wonderful children's books. But he also read a great book called My Uncle Oswald, which is definitely worth reading, My Uncle Oswald. I had to put the book down once when I was on a train because it was so funny. I was embarrassing myself and those in the carriage because I just couldn't stop laughing. I was literally, it's the only book I've ever cried at through laughter. It was so painful. I had to stop reading it. I couldn't open the book up without dying of laughter. My Uncle Oswald, okay, by Roald Dahl. So get the book and watch and read it. It's so wonderful. But he did have a serious side, did Roald Dahl. And he did a series of short stories about crime and how they get away with it. Because this is the big question with Jimmy Savile. How did he get away with it? Well, he had a lot of help, as I mentioned earlier on. And he wasn't the sharpest tool in the box, was Jimmy Savile. And this story then starts with an old lady who is living with a tyrant, her husband. Imagine pre-Second World War in the UK, and it's terrace houses, and she's stuck with this piece of crap called her husband, he's tyrannical. He treats her like crap, and she, this was a play on TV, by the way. It wasn't in the book, but anyway, the scene starts that she's in her terrace house and she's in the kitchen. He's at had, the table in the kitchen with his feet up with a fag on and smoking, and she's trying to talk to him, and he's yes, and he's ignoring her. A real arsehole, you can tell, in his string vest, and he looks like a slob. And she's cooking his breakfast, and she's getting all excited, and she's thinking, well, she's a bit scared of him because he's a bit of a wife beater, and she despises him. And anyway, she's doing her best to just be civil, if you like, and he's just got his fag hanging out his mouth, and she's cooking his dinner. He's got a frying pan on the go, and she gives him his 2 slices of bacon and sausage, whatever he has for his breakfast. And she's there cleaning up the side with a cloth. And he starts complaining. And she said, look, I've done your breakfast and I hope you like it, but what's for lunch? Came the old fart. What's for lunch then? And she says, well, I've got a very nice frozen leg of lamb off the butcher. It's on the side, and I shall use that. We'll have that for dinner tonight. And he starts to give her a real hard time. And he gives her so much time, and then he starts to really give her a verbal abuse. And she snaps. She thinks, God. She turns round from the kitchen sink where she stood, and she looks at the back of his balding head, this bastard that sat there giving her a hard time. I'm sure you can visualise this. He's reading his paper after his breakfast. He's not helping at all. He's just a real shyster. And she can't contain herself. Something takes over. And she grabs hold of this leg of lamb, which is frozen. And she turns around and she whacks him as hard as she can on the back of the head and splits his skull open. It kills him instantly. It takes his head off, quite frankly. This is probably 40 years of abuse pent up. And he's received the end result in the back of his head via a leg of lamb. Well, she nonchalantly notices that he's dead and carries on she leaves him. She's just totally detached from the whole scene. He's basically slumped over the table. And strangely enough, he's not gushing blood. She's just knocked him unconscious, but knocked him dead actually. But he's out of it. And she just carries on making the Sunday lunch. And she lights the cooker in them days, and she popped it in, and it's just like nothing ever happened. And there's her husband behind her, like, dead. And she just casually phones the police. And she says to the police, I came back, I found my husband had come back from the shops and had his breakfast, which I gave him, and I went upstairs to get ready and come down after I gave him his breakfast, and I found him like this. And then, as you can see, I was in the middle of, I was planning to, what's in the oven, said the police officer. She says, oh, well, I was planning, before he got up even, put the leg of mutton, this huge leg, in the oven. And that's it. And they said, oh, well, did he have any enemies? He says, well, he had lots of enemies. He's not exactly the nicest guy in the block, is he? And I don't know who would do this to him. And, we've always got our back door. It's always open, really. We're open house, terrace houses. And we don't know. Somebody must have come in and done this to him. I don't know how somebody's whacked him on the head. And she's putting the big tears on, pretending. She's very matter of fact. And the police are absolutely, no way could you blame this old duck for doing this. And most of the day goes by, they don't have forensics in them days. It was a case of the Black Marai van turned up and took the old fart away. As I say, there's very little damage apart from him getting smacked on the back of the head. There's no crime scene to talk of. And she said, well, I don't know. Did he have enemies? Well, he had lots of them, but did he owe any money? I'm not sure who he did owe money to. I don't think he did. And yada, yada. She was the last suspect. There's no way that old duck did that. And the police, were absolutely astonished. They said, well, we don't know. We're going to have to continue with the inquiries. And she was butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. You wouldn't think it. 3/4 of the way through the day, towards the evening, she said to the investigating sergeant, well, look, you've been here all day, you haven't really found a lot. Well, thanks for your time. And look, it's a shame to let this leg of lamb go to waste. Why don't you two gentlemen join me to let's just at least eat, because we were all hungry. And they said, okay. And they sat there and they consumed the evidence, the leg of lamb. And they never solved the crime, basically. Well, it would be very difficult to solve that crime, fundamentally, because where's the murder weapon? Well, the police have just eaten it. That's what the point of the whole thing was. The irony of the whole play was that the perpetrator and the coppers were working together to eat the evidence. Okay, and that's two opposing sides, isn't it? The perpetrator and the investigative lot called the police and the justice system, working together to conceal the evidence of the slaughter, fundamentally, of a perfectly innocent man, although distasteful. So it had it's a great little program. You've got to watch this if you can come across it. Roald Dahl. One of Roald Dahl's short stories about the irony of life is that you can get the investigative lot, the police, and the criminal working together, both opposite sides of the coin, if you like, but at the end of the day achieving one result, and that was to hide the evidence. The police do it unwittingly on this occasion, and the old duck did it deliberately, because she truly knew she wasn't as innocent as she passed herself off to be. And a lot of people are like this. And it was demonstrated in a short play by Roald Dahl, the nuances of life, how our life and what we're in work that way. Every day things like this happen. Well, it struck me when I was watching this program about Jimmy Savile that reminded me, everything that Jimmy Savile does basically reminded me of that play by Roald Dahl, because Jimmy Savile was, on the face of it, Mr. Jingle Jangle, he was, he was well known, he was on TV, he was a celebrity, as they call them. He was friends in very, very, very high places and friends in very, very low places. That's for sure. Well, who else knocks around in this inner circle of these, obviously the ninth circle, we have anybody from the Royals all the way down to the Sutcliffes, and Moira Hindley, for example. All these types of Jimmy Savile's friends. This guy was incredible. The power in which this guy wielded. It's not what you know, it's who you know, it seems. But I think there was a lot more to it than that with Savile. I met Jimmy Savile once when I was at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. Passed him in the corridor. I totally ignored him because I had my suspicion. I didn't like the guy anyway. But he was expecting, oh, hello, I just walked past him. I had this sense, and he reeked of body odour. He truly did. You know, when you walk past someone with aftershave or perfume, you can smell it down the hospital corridor for sure. But here he was. He just stunk of BO in Stoke Mandeville. That's before they modernised Stoke Mandeville. Never forget that experience. I thought, what a horrible, horrible human being. Even then, I got the feeling something was strange about the bloke before all this came out. But let's think about this. We have the police acting as double agents. On one hand, they're acting for the agents of people like Jimmy Savile and the agents for that old bird at the sink cooking dinner for her dead husband that she's just killed. Same analogy. And then the police are apparently on the victim's side. Of course, they're very sympathetic. They come around your house and tell you that your child's been sacrificed or gone missing, just like the McCann girl, you know. Don't know. You tell me on the McCanns why in excess of £6 million was spent in advertising and TV airtime and the rest, trying to discover where Madeleine McCann was. Just one missing child, in excess of £6 million, and that's conservative, was spent and continues to get publicity to this day, when there are thousands upon thousands of parents in the same boat as the McCanns, and there's thousands and thousands of their children are missing, and yet nothing on the television. What's so special about the McCanns, and what's so special about Maddie? And why are the Podesta brothers not in court answering the questions? What a coincidence, isn't it, with Pizzagate at the time? Yes. Something very strange about the McCann story that somebody needs to blow the whistle on. But the truth will out, as Shakespeare said. My personal view about the McCanns being both medical people was that they wanted to enjoy the drinky poos that evening, and they thought that Maddie was a bit unruly and decided to sedate her. But I think they overdosed that child. I think. My personal opinion is I think they overdosed that child with sleeping pills, and she had a respiratory arrest and suffocated in her sleep. And on return, discovering this child was dead, they made arrangements to dispose of her body. I don't think Madeleine was kidnapped at all. I think she was found dead and got rid of by the McCanns. That's my theory. Heartless as it sounds, I think it may be true. There's some gravity in there. There's always a little bit of truth somewhere, but isn't it funny how the McCanns are such high profile? What makes them so special? That everybody would, well, we would, taxpayers, etc., would pay in excess of £6 million to try and find Maddie, when not other missing children don't get that afforded on them. This world, our country, is absolutely insane. It is run by insane people, psychopathic, sociopathic people. The politicians, I've not met one politician I've liked. I never got the chance to meet Enoch Powell. Well, he was a real statesman and a real politician, but he was surrounded by the PDs and the psychos, wasn't he? Look at Ted Heath. Yes, child murderer, sacrificer, Satanist. And this is the world we're living in. It's an insane world run by mad people. And it truly is an evil place. And the best you and I can do really is to try and avoid evil people and avoid vexatious people. They are bad for our souls. And keep hold of your soul. Don't hero worship celebrities because they're celebrities because somebody out there wants them to be successful. Somebody powerful wants them to be successful, even though they're talentless pricks most of the time, way beyond their sell-by date. But they're useful idiots. They're useful for people Hollywood is full of these people, another nest of vipers. Isn't it strange that the most violence in our world comes from the politicians? Most violence and most wars and most deaths on this world are caused by politicians. They make the rules, they initiate the wars, they do the war planning, and they decide which countries are going to get war upon them. Just the politicians. And the politicians don't decide this, folks. Those who control the politicians decide. You see, if you take men, humans off this planet of such nature, I don't get up in the morning wanting to go to war with anybody. I'm sure you don't. But somebody out there is obsessed with killing and sacrifice because they worship something that demands it from them. And they don't demand it from them personally. They say, I will arrange that you will get your sacrifice. And this is what it is. It's all human sacrifice. That's all wars are. They don't achieve anything. Nobody wins a war, quite frankly. It just goes quiet for a while. It'll start again. As sure as eggs are eggs. History will repeat itself. This world that we live on will never be at peace, while there are politicians and Satanists and the 1%ers and money and the bankers, particularly the Lombard Bank, which is a private banking cartel of the 1%. It's actually 1% of the 1%. It's the 1% of the 1% that own this world. And we sit there, we're worried about our mortgage payments, our rent, who's going to pay the gas bill, the electric bill. It's a survival game if ever there was, isn't it? You see, when you own or owe the bank £500 because you're overdrawn, you worry, don't you? I'm sure you do. I have done, and I'm sure you do or have done and been worried about the lack of money to pay your debts. Well, if you own the bank £500, you worry. But if you owe the bank 500 million, the bank worry. It's all a question of ownership, isn't it? And liability. But it's rather strange. You can give a man a gun and he can hold up a bank. If you give a man a bank, he can hold up the world. And that's what's been happening on the world that we live upon. The banks own the world. Okay, we are being held up by a bunch of criminal, psychopaths, satanic, ritualistic lunatics. And there's people out there who will hide the evidence and help the bankers eat their leg of lamb every day of the week, leaving no paper trail, etc. The documents, by the way, for the biggest scam in history, the missing money that was reported in America, the missing billions of dollars missing. The government were rumbled with the Bushes about where all this money went, and all the accounting, all the documents for those accounts proving where their money had gone was disappeared, because they were housed in Building 7, the one that Silverstein had collapse half an hour after those Twin Towers went down. and all those documents proving the Bushes were up to their neck in it and knew exactly, and the Rumsfelds and the Cheneys. You talk about, what a coincidence. It was 7 years in the planning, was 9/11. 7 years. And there's in excess of 2,000 people in the circle of trust who knew about 9/11 arrangements because they were the organisers of it all. And if nobody goes to prison about 9/11, you're not going to be surprised to learn, are you? Because you've got the police investigating the police and politicians investigating the politicians. And you know and I know, what are the odds? You couldn't make it up, could you? Look out for those carrying legs of lamb out of the freezer departments in your local supermarket. Try and figure out who's going to be the sucker that either has it externally or internally served upon them. Catch you tomorrow.